Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Jasmine Star Show, a podcast about turning your passion into profits and practical tips for growing your business. I'm your host, a photographer and business strategist from Newport Beach, California, and I cannot wait to dive into one of the most frequently asked questions I get. I get this question at least once a day, and that is the question of, how did you start your photography business? Now, I should back up and let people know that while I am talking about starting a photography business, a lot of the same principles I would use to actually start a business today. So even if you're not a photographer and you're not really wanting to build a photography business, but you really want to get your business off the ground, I want to invite you into this story. Now, I should also admit that a lot of times when I podcast, I have a very detailed outline of the things I'm going to talk about. But instead of this making it sound like a scriptive narrative, I'm really talking just from this vision of who I was back in 2006. We are recording this in 2020, and it feels like when I look back at that, the thing I wish I could do is go back to 2006 and tell the Jasmine at that time as she stood in line at City Hall to get her very first business license. And that would be, you're going to be okay. Your dreams are bigger than you think. And don't worry. You'll always pull through. And the same advice that I would give Jasmine of 2006 would be, I hope, the same advice that I give Jasmine of 2020. I hope that in 15 years from now, I could look back at who I am now, sitting on the floor of a living room. I'm sitting with my legs crossed. I'm sitting in yoga pants and Ugg boots. The dog is sleeping at my feet. And I'm sitting really close to the ground because I have a feeling that the carpet absorbs some of the sound and it makes me sound like I'm a legit podcaster. I have pillows surrounded me just to kind of absorb extra sound. And what I want to tell me of today is, you're going to be okay. Your dreams are bigger than you think, and you will always pull through. So on that note, let's go back to January 1st, 2006. Now, I'm not going to start the story at the origin because I did that in episode 1 of the Jasmine Star Show. So if you haven't listened to episode 1 of the Jasmine Star Show, I am going to ask you to pause this episode and listen to that one because it really sets the foundation of who I was and what got me to the point of actually opening my very first camera. That episode is also less than 30 minutes. So think of this as a whole choose your own adventure. Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys kind of style. If you heard episode 1, let's dive into January 1st, 2006. And this was the very first time I opened a digital camera. Now, I didn't have a digital camera. I had never used a digital camera, but this is the start in a new beginning for myself. I gave myself 1 year to pursue photography instead of going back to law school. And I knew that this was going to be it, that if I couldn't get it off the ground, if I didn't have promising leads, if I didn't make a little bit of money, then logistically and logically, I would go back to law school. So I got a part-time job at my dad's church. My dad is a pastor in East Los Angeles, and I knew I needed to be responsible and create, even if it was very meager, an income. I had to contribute. I was a newlywed with my brand new husband who was working at a startup company. We had no money, but the benefits at working at your dad's church, it was that you got health insurance. So part-time and full-time employees at the church got health benefits. So I worked Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the Arc in Montebello, California. There, I would put together a radio show. I mean, hot dang, talk about a full circle moment. I am sitting here with my own radio show. Well, radio show-ish. Does a podcast count as a radio show? Anyway, my dad had a radio show that was nationally syndicated. And I was the one who was doing the organizing. I was doing, fulfillment. I was doing a lot of things specifically for the radio program. And I was doing that 3 days a week so that on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I was able to pour that time and energy into building my photography business. And when I say starting my photography business, I really should go back to the nuts and bolts. I had a orange tree in the back of our apartment complex. Now, we lived in an apartment complex that was built like in the 1940s, and it was somewhat like a duplex, so that an elderly lady lived below us, and we lived in the top duplex. And we lived it was not the nicest of neighborhoods. Let me just tell you what we could afford back then. It was a little shady. And so I would go into the backyard. We had this orange tree, and I really need to learn how to become a photographer. I knew nothing about digital photography. I didn't even know like how to set the basic foundations of taking photos. So I would use this orange tree as just practice. I would shoot the orange tree from the front, from the back, from the side at different times of the day. I would set up a pair of shoes on the inside of my kitchen and shoot it from the front, from the side to the back in different lighting scenarios. I would go to Google and say like, why can't I figure out how to become a photographer? Like, what is going on? What am I getting wrong? And so 3 days a week, I was dedicated to my craft. I would carry my camera everywhere with me, and it's an action I still take with me today. So those habits early on as a very first early business owner are things that have transformed my life and career, and habits I still maintain to this day. So I was practicing about 3 or 4 months on basic things, and I started joining a photography community online. And I would see what other photographers were talking about, how they were getting business, what they were doing. And I became active in that community, not knowing photography necessarily, but I was finding ways that I could participate in conversations that were related to business. Now, I never started a business. I never knew anybody in my life who had ever started a business. And to put things in context, I'm a girl from the hood. I didn't grow up watching people build businesses. I didn't grow up actually thinking that entrepreneurship was a path in life that you could take. I didn't grow up sitting around tables with like ham and potatoes and, asking, what did you do today, Dolly, as I took a sip of milk. Like that was anything but my life. But what I quickly understood is that I could take really scrappy ideas from like the hood and make them work in real life, which is like not to quote Tupac here, but I'm trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. Okay. So with some of the skills that I had I was a pretty savvy writer. I started a blog, and at the time that was really not done. And so when other photographers were like, I'm looking to start a blog, I would give advice like, this is what I found is working. This is the cadence. This is what people have been responding well to. When there were other photographers who needed help, like say writing their bio for a website that they were trying to create, I would say, I'd be more than happy to help you. Let's hop on a quick call. And so in the process of me talking to other photographers and asking how they built their business, I was getting educated. And in exchange for their time, I would turn back over their bio story, and they were like completely blown away, and I was completely blown away. And so my name started getting passed around in a really small photography community of a person who understood photography and also could write. So as a result of that, I built trust, not on my photography skills, but on who I was as a person. And so about 6 months into my quote unquote business, so around the summer of 2006, there were photographers who were looking for assistants, people to help them at weddings. And I was like, me. I worked for about 6 to 10 months for free. In the beginning, I was just carrying bags. I was sweating as I carried lighting equipment. I took and will continue to take any hustling photography gig I could, because I was getting access. I was learning this skill just by watching, and I was understanding how photographers acted, spoke, and behaved. And it was around that time that I started developing relationships with photographers that instead of just like carrying their bags and cleaning their gear, they would say, Jasmine, can you bring your camera? Feel free to shoot when you're not schlepping gear. That was the game changer. The only reason why I was invited to go on big shoots, on weddings, on assisting gigs was because I was humble and willing to do the work, build the trust, and once they knew me, then they allowed me to shoot. So this is around 2007 where I started assisting in what they call second and third shooting. In the beginning, I was actually fourth shooting, which means that there were 3 other main photographers and I was just like bottom of the totem pole, shoot the stuff that nobody wants to shoot. And I was doing it happily. I was driving anywhere from Santa Barbara, California down to San Diego, California. So I took any assisting gig for free or second, third, fourth shooting for free from about 2.5 hours north of me and about 2.5 hours south of me. That was the University of Hard Knocks. I made mistakes. I stepped in a line. I felt like I dropped the ball in so many different ways. But because I cared about who I was working for, I always went out of my way to make it right. And they were patient enough to teach me. And they were patient enough to continue inviting me. And there was one photographer in particular. He had me third shooting. And then a few months later, he had me second shooting. And then I will never forget in the summer of 2007, at the end of a 10-hour wedding day with around 400 guests, he gave me a check for $200. And he said, "Job well done." And I will tell you that I took JD, my husband and my business partner, out to Chili's. We had a blooming onion. We kind of just celebrated. I was like, "Babe, we're living our best life right now." I made $200. Like, I was just like, literally, I was like, "Baby, I'm gonna make it rain tonight. You want Coke? We're gonna get you. You want a Sprite? What do you want, babe? We're going big." So that was the very first time that I got paid from another photographer. Now, during this time, I was shooting anybody who would pay me. Like, legitimately, you want headshots? I'll shoot headshots. You want family photos? I'll shoot family photos. I was doing it for around $25 to $50 for a shoot. You guys, this is a story. I needed a logo for my business and I didn't have money. But I'm a firm believer, even still to this day, I love bartering. Bartering is like a trade of services. And I met a graphic designer at my dad's church. Hey, shout out for like religious nepotism at its best, y'all. So there's this graphic designer. He went to my dad's church and I said I needed a logo. And he said he wanted some photos done, to which I said, "Let's trade." So he designs my very first logo. And then I go over to his apartment and he has a motorcycle inside his apartment. And I have to do a photo shoot of him on his motorcycle on fluffy carpet. You guys, I mean, these photos are so bad. But you want to know what? I had a logo. He was happy. We both went our own ways. So around this time, I'm just kind of like, shooting for 25, 50. I'm bartering. I got my first check as a second photographer. And then in the summer of 2007, I get an email from a bride. And she says, "I received your name from another photographer. And he said that you would probably be within my budget." And I said, "Oh, great. Well, who's the photographer?" And this is all via email. I said, "Oh, this is so lovely to meet you. May I ask who was the referring photographer?" And she mentioned his name. And I knew that this photographer charged $10,000 for his services. Remember, this is back in 2007. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this photographer charges $10,000. That probably means this bride has $8,000 and I've arrived. Watch out, world. I have arrived. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm totally available on your wedding date." And she asked for my fees. And I asked, "What's your budget?" And she responded, $1,000 for a 13-hour wedding and all of the images included. And my response was, "Funny. That's what I charge, $1,000 for 13 hours and all the images on a CD." Oh, okay. I mean, basically, I was just like, "You want to give me a check with 4 numbers on it? I need to buy a lottery ticket because apparently I'm the luckiest person on the face of this earth." That wedding was in October 2007. So we were communicating in the summer of 2007. Her wedding was a few months later. She sent me a deposit of $500. And I was like, "Jasmine, it is time to get real serious about your business." I had created a blog. I was talking about my journey. I was posting pictures. I was really trying to bring people on the experience to manage expectation because I didn't have a website at the time. I didn't have an album or a portfolio to show her at the time. When she asked to see, images that I've shot, I literally burned a CD. I put it in a padded envelope and I wrapped it in a bow. Like I wrapped the CD in a bow in a padded envelope and I mailed it to her. And I was like, here's my portfolio. It was truly the most ghetto approach to being a photographer. And I'm here to tell you, it got me to where I needed to go. She saw the images, she trusted me, and there was my very first opportunity. As I was building the blog, I wanted to make sure that I was living a true, authentic, transparent story. I didn't want somebody hiring me thinking that I was like this really refined, robust photographer when I wasn't. But what I realized at the time was, yes, I was talking about my photography and who I was able to shoot with, but I was also incorporating really personal aspects of my life. My mom was still recuperating from her bout with brain cancer. I was a newlywed. I was talking about, dates that I went on with my husband. I had just gotten a new puppy. I was talking about the naming process, really personal aspects of my life. And it was just what I did to connect with people. In October 2007, I arrived to my very first gig. That was a wedding. What I didn't realize was that there was going to be 12 bridesmaids. 1, 2, 12. It was like basically a wedding army. And I walked into the room and I was like, hi, I'm Jasmine. And the girl said, Jasmine, we've been passing your blog post around on MySpace. We're so excited to meet you. How's Polo? And I was like, how do you know about my dog? How do you know that I went to the Clippers game with my husband? Like they knew these really personal things because they were following along on my blog. I shoot this wedding. I'm not going to get into the specifics of the wedding. Let me just tell you that half the wedding was absolutely, positively amazing. I was having a blast. I was vibing with people. And then the other half of the wedding, nightmare, because from a technical perspective, I didn't know how to shoot at night. I had one flash. It was so dark. It was an outdoor wedding with no lights. Like basically I was shooting into the dark. JD had to run to our car into our emergency kit and bring out a flashlight. My husband brought out a flashlight. I'm shooting a wedding with a flashlight. You guys, I can't even tell you how hot mess this was. And I thought on that moment, this is the last wedding I ever shoot because she's going to hate her wedding reception photos. I really thought it was over. I legitimately thought it was over. So the next day, I'm crying and I'm like, I think my career is over. And JD, my ever-present cheerleader, was just like, okay, you can cry. And when you're done, you're going to fix it. I was like, you're right, I'm going to fix it. So I created a slideshow. So I got the photos from the day. I created a slideshow. I set it to music. I emailed it to the bride. And I said, this is the story of your day. I'll be editing the rest of the gallery. This slideshow had around 50 to 55 images, including a few very dark reception photos. She loved that slideshow so much. She emailed it to her 12 bridesmaids. They emailed it to their friends. They posted it on MySpace, and things caught on like wildfire. People started following my blog. Like her 12 bridesmaids were so stoked with the photos and my story and who I was that I call them the J-Star Cheer Squad. Those 12 girls revolutionized the way that people were speaking about my business. In addition to the blog, that's how I booked my second client, and she was getting married in November. She came across my blog because a coworker of hers at the dentist office had searched for a very particular type of brain cancer, and that was the type of brain cancer my mom had. And so she stumbled across my blog, and even though she wasn't looking for a wedding photographer, her coworker was. And she said, hey, you should check out this girl. So I get this random email and says, Jasmine, I came across your blog. I'd like to get more information. So I, of course, sent her a burned CD of images, wrap them in a bow, and put them in a padded envelope. And she says, okay, I'm ready to book. How much do you charge? And I was like, I charge $1,000 for 13 hours and the CD. I was just like, that sounds about right. And she's like, great. She sent me a check. I booked the wedding and we shot the wedding. And the third client that I had ever booked found me by way of my blog. You see, there's this restaurant called Yamashiro in Hollywood, California. And we had celebrated an anniversary at Yamashiro. And I talked about a previous wedding guest who was on the blog. There was like all these different posts, like how I spent my anniversary at Yamashiro, how there was like a bridesmaid who had a really cool, Korean vibe with her family and her friends. And then I also talked about how brides had certain hairstyles. Okay. All of these little things at the time, back in 2007, I didn't know what SEO was, search engine optimization. I didn't know that people can actually find you on Google. I was just blogging my life as it happened. Well, this girl's at work and she types in Hollywood Korean hairstyles. She's Korean. She's getting married in Hollywood and she was looking for a hairstyle. And those words appeared on my blog. She came across my blog and she was like, who is this girl? I kind of like her vibe. She reached out to me. I burned a CD, wrapped it in a bow, and sent it to her in a padded envelope. And she booked me for $1,000. That was the start of me truly understanding that you do not have to be the best. You do not have to be the smartest. You don't have to be the most qualified. You don't have to be the most talented. You actually kind of, sort of can be very average and get people to invest in the thing that you're selling. Why? What I understood back then was that brides are not looking for photographs. They are also looking for photographers. And people are not just buying cakes, they're buying a piece of the baker. And people aren't just buying an artwork, what they're buying is something from the artist. This transformed the way I looked at my business. Because while other people who were doing the exact same thing I was so concerned about having the best camera, the best lens, the best computer, the best editing software, I was concerned about showing up as the best version of me, serving people well, communicating online, and telling a story. And let me tell you that when I look back at that, I thought I was doing it wrong. I thought that I was at the bottom of the totem pole. I thought I was at a disadvantage. And I am here to tell you that your disadvantages will become your advantages if you change your perspective. Because what I didn't realize then that I realize now is that I cannot compete on just a camera, on just a computer, on just the same presets. All of those things made me the same as everybody else. And if I wanted to clump myself and my business as being the same, I was playing at a disadvantage. I wasn't as good as they were. I wasn't as rich as they were. I didn't have a website. I didn't have a portfolio. I didn't have an album. I didn't have any of the tools that would make me competitive with them. So I just used the things that made me different. And because I felt like I was different, I realized that I was competing with something no one else had. My eyes, my brain, my heart, and my chutzpah. And as you're listening to this right now, I am looking at you in your face and telling you that nobody compete with your eyes, your brain, your heart, your chutzpah. So stop hiding behind the tools of your trade and start standing in front of your story, your narrative, and who you are. No matter how little you think you have, use it as a point of differentiation. I will tell you that those 3 weddings at the end of 2007 turned into 38 weddings in 2008. I was a girl who had nothing and made something out of it. Not because I was the most talented or the funniest or the smartest or the wittiest. It was because I owned my story, I owned who I was, and I served my clients well. That, my friends, is how I was able to elevate my business. And starting in 2006 and moving to 2009, I was voted one of the top 10 wedding photographers in the world. In 3 years, I went from 0 to having an internationally recognized brand. And what I want to share about today are the 10 best things that I did to build my photography business. But what I'm here to tell you is that these same principles can be used to build your service-based business. Can I get an amen? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get in. I actually wanted to do this like a top 10 list, the way that like those nightly shows, like Jimmy Fallon, top 10 list. But I'm not that creative, so I just started at 1. I'm very linear, okay? I wanted to go 10, 9. Instead, I'm going to go 1 to 10. Let's get this party started. Tip number 1 on building a service-based business that is standing out from the crowd is build your own table. When I first started my business, I understand why people were not including me in their conversations. I wasn't talented. I understand why I wasn't invited to the networking events. I didn't have a portfolio. I didn't have a website. Nobody knew who I was. I understood why nobody was inviting me to go to conferences or events with them because I didn't have money. I understood all those things. And while it made me very, very sad, I also realized that sadness and being ostracized is a decision. I was deciding to let other people determine how I felt. And so I realized, hey, if you're not going to invite me to your events, and if you're not going to invite me to sit at your proverbial table, I'm going to build my own table. So what I did was I looked around in my geographic area and I found 3 other new photographers within very similar price range. We kind of were all just trying to get it started. We were the people on the outskirts. And so I invited everybody to meet at Cheesecake Factory in Brea, California. And we met at Cheesecake Factory. We had lunch and we were swapping business ideas and we're talking about what was working. And we talked about contracts. We talked about how we were getting business and what we needed to do. And we decided to collaborate with each other. We all had our own, they had their websites and some of them had blogs and I only had a blog. But then I had an idea. I think we all had an idea. Forgive me. We all kind of came to this idea that we can create one blog and we would all be posting on that one blog from all of our weddings because this would help us get discovered on searchability SEO. And we also said that on days that were booked with weddings, that we would only refer to the other people in our circle. This was a game changer because now every time I referred another client to somebody else, I knew that they were going to refer back to me if they were booked. This was the best thing that I did for my business. I didn't stand on the periphery of somebody else's circle. I made my own circle. And I am so proud that the 4 of us took the little we had and we booked out our entire years for each other. Let's get into step number 2. Have hobbies outside of what you do professionally. I'm an avid reader and I'm a pretty avid yogi. I practice yoga many times a week. When I have free time, you will likely find me in downward dog. Okay, and you'll probably just also find me laying down with a bag of Skittles and a good book. No judgment. My husband and I are huge movie lovers, so we make it a point to see at least one movie a week. We usually really enjoy foreign films. I love very sad, evocative movies. Like when JD and I go to the movies, we are sitting amongst people who are like 70 and 80 years old. And we're like watching a French movie in black and white, eating popcorn, living our best life. If my personal trainer is listening to this, we're not eating popcorn. We pretend we eat popcorn. Remember, wink, wink, I'm not eating grains. Right. So yes, going back to the movies, I've realized that allowing my brain to fill with elements outside of my craft and work, it really pushed me to think differently and create in new ways. When I see a movie, I appreciate the cinematography, I appreciate the storyline, I appreciate the arc, and I really learned how to do the same thing with my photography later. Number 3, I networked with photographers who inspired me. And I mentioned this before, right? In that photography group online, I was using the skills that I had that were not related to photography as an opportunity for me to connect with people who would otherwise never pay attention to me. So this list was ever growing, it was ever changing, but I can say that meeting others in my industry was the best thing that I did for my early photography business. Because these people, they didn't just inspire my work and they just didn't keep me on my toes, but it was a really great way for me to see what other people were doing who were farther along in their career and in the game. And I was watching and modeling. And even though I didn't have a formal mentor, I could look at these people and see what they're doing from a distance and model my business after theirs. And that was like the first iteration of what it meant to be mentored at a distance. I have to also say that when I talk about networking as an introvert, it would take everything out of me. Like I would have to force myself to get in the car, force myself to turn the ignition, I would sit in a parking lot being like, it's okay, Jasmine, just go into this event, promise yourself that you'll stay there for 59 minutes and then you could leave. Like getting uncomfortable is like a constant theme in any new business. But the more you get uncomfortable, the more you see positive changes. Let's get into tip number 4. Build a brand. If you've been hanging out here for a while, you've probably heard me say this, but I'm going to say it again and again. Building a brand is the best way to grow your business. When I started my business, I set out to become a photographer, but in the process, I built a brand. I didn't realize it at the time, but it's what happened. And I truly believe it has been the biggest contributing factor to our success. A brand is what somebody says about you when you walk out of the room. Now, if you would like to find some of the resources and have me go deeper on explaining how to build a brand, I would love for you to download my free branding bundle. You can find that at jasminestar.com/branding. Now, Seth Godin describes a brand as a series and set of expectations, memories, and stories that taken together account for a consumer's decision to choose one business over another. And not to take a spin. Oh, actually, I am taking a spin on what Seth Godin says. I shrunk that entire definition to an experience. Stories, memories, relationships. Oh, that's an experience. How you make someone feel is the way and the reason why somebody will choose your business in a sea of other wildly talented options. How you make someone feel is the most powerful thing that you can do as a new business owner. Tip number 5, which I get it is not applicable to everybody, but I'm going to tell you, for me, it was a game changer. I worked with my husband. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of couples who couldn't imagine working, eating, sleeping, dreaming, hoping with their spouse every waking moment. But I love it. I don't even care. In fact, at the time of this recording, my husband played a record, Bon Iver. So this record is playing, and I'm sitting on the couch with the dog, and he pulls me up, and he's like, I know you're about to start your podcast, but do you remember dancing in our apartment at night with the radio above our refrigerator? And he's like, let's dance in the living room. And we slow danced to Bon Iver. And let me just tell you, in that moment, I know people would be driven crazy to do everything with their partner. I'm just one of those people who I'm down for it. I'm really down for it. I feel incredibly blessed to be supported by one of the most amazing men I have ever met. And I know it sounds cheesy, but my husband, JD, is mind-blowingly awesome. Now, I think he's my version of awesome. You might meet him and be like, he's aight. And I'm cool with that. But he's my idea of awesome. I still to this day maintain, and I mean this hand to heaven, I have no idea why this man married me. My mother-in-law for years was baffled. Now she's finally on my team. She's Team Jasmine. She's come around, but it's been about a decade to get her there. But my mom and dad every day, every time they see my husband, thank you for marrying Jasmine. I totally married up, and I increased my business worth by having him be a part of the team. Tip number 6 is to create a schedule. I have strict office hours, and this allows me to live the life I want. I crave freedom and living a life without boundaries. So by adhering to a schedule outlining my work, I know where I can skimp and splurge on life's special moments. Yes, I take long lunches on occasion, and sometimes I watch midday matinees with my husband, but it's only because I've planned my schedule and I know what needs to be done by when. If you'd like a peek into the average workday and what that looks like for me, you can find a full breakdown at jasminestar.com/ productivity. And you can also get my free productivity planner complete with a sample of my daily to-do list. Y'all, I've said it 1,000 times before. I never preach something I don't practice. When I talk about building a brand, I make resources to help other people build a brand. When I talk about people creating a schedule, it's because I know that having a schedule leads to not just productivity, but time for creativity. That leads us to point number 7. I hung out with people who were smarter than me. They say you are only as successful as the 5 closest people to you. And man, I totally have to agree. I've met brilliant people as I've built my business, and they've given me the most amazing gift, and that's friendship. Being able to see success unfold for people around me offers a blueprint how I can do the exact same thing in my life, in my business. They paint vibrant pictures with the same brushes that I have, so I'm challenged to color the horizon in a way that I imagine. I mean, look at me out here, painting pictures with my words. I have maintained, and I maintain till this day, I want to be the dumbest person in a room. If I'm not the dumbest person in a room, I'm not in the right room. I'm not intimidated by smarts and brilliance. It inspires me to raise the bar, and I encourage you to do the same thing. Tip number 8, as I built my service-based business, is that I'm a huge proponent of creating an experience. The more I paid attention to experiences that I created for clients, the more people spoke about my services. And people speaking about my services, that's the holy grail of an entrepreneur's life. When people are empowered to talk about the experiences that you create, and I'm talking about the experiences you create in person or the experiences you create online, they become evangelists for your product or service, right? Like I actually, back early in my career, I was speaking to photographers about how I was building my business, and I created this presentation, which I thought was really savvy at the time. I was like, look at me being cute. I called the presentation From Lips to Clicks: How to Get People to Talk About Your Business in Person and Online. Okay, super cheesy, but I still like it to this day. Maybe I'll call this podcast episode From Lips to Clicks: How to Get People to Talk About Your Business. Hey, you know what? I'm homeschooled and I'm a nerd, and I'll play around with these titles. So the question then becomes, okay, but Jasmine, how do you create an experience? Well, when I was doing this specifically for my clients as I was building my business, I want to give you 3 top ideas on how I was able to create an experience on a relatively small budget. I would send client gifts. Now, you might not have that big of a budget, and I didn't have that big of a budget. So I'm going to give you an example of a really, really, really inexpensive gift. I was on Etsy, like the online store for makers and creators, and I saw this tiny matchbox. It was a designer in Japan, and it was a matchbox that she had wrapped and customized. And when you push the matchbox open, you'd have a tiny little 3D note on the inside. And I was just fascinated with how tiny and cute it was and the ability for me to customize it. So for my clients, I ordered a matchbox with the couple's names on it on the front. And then when you push open the matchbox, it would be a little thank you note, like, thank you for allowing me to be your photographer. Okay. And then I ordered all of them and had them shipped to me. And then I wrote a handwritten note to each of my clients, just saying how much I appreciated them. You guys, that matchbox, I think at the time was like $4 each box. And then I had to pay for shipping, which was $2 each box. I mean, for less than $12 for the total gift, I had people taking pictures of their matchboxes and putting them on Twitter and Facebook. And Instagram wasn't around back then. Do I sound like an ancient business owner? Back in my day. Listen, that tiny matchbox that cost me $12 to send the client got me at minimum thousands of dollars of advertising. Another way to create an experience was to anticipate questions. The more that I built my business, the more that I realized that there was patterns in the ways that people were asking questions. If you can anticipate questions that your clients are going to ask and you send them a beautifully designed, helpful PDF answering their questions, or if you can say, hey, I know we're getting ready for X. Now you could be a hairstylist, you could be a dog walker, you could be a graphic designer, you could be a photographer, anything anything that's service-based. If you know that your client's going to have a question, where do I park? What time do I arrive? When can I expect it? What's the timeline? What do you need from me? Send it to them in advance, and they're just like, wow. Thank you for saving me time, and thank you for preparing me for success. The last way that I had created an experience that was totally time and cost effective was I would create resources that would help my clients. Now, as a photographer, I would create a PDF, like what to wear on a photo shoot, what time to arrive, how many outfits to expect. I was literally sending them posing guides. Like, people who are not models don't know how to pose. And so I was sending them these beautifully designed ideas with my own photos, getting them best prepared for the shoot. When people feel like you have their best interest in mind, they don't become fans, they become fanatics. Now we're going to round this out to tip number 9. I asked my parents for advice. My parents immigrated to the United States with literally nothing. So it's easy for an outsider to hear their accents or judge the color of their skin, but they are incredibly insightful and savvy, though neither of them went to college. They just get human behavior. They are watchers, and they are kind, and they are givers, and they taught me to see the inside of people, to see fear, to see insecurity, to see doubt, to see hope, to see unstated dreams, and to hone in on that and listen to what is said between the lines. They provided emotional and spiritual insight, and that has laid the foundation to the core of who I am. And that is also the core of my personal brand. Everything I am is because of their sacrifice, their love, and their devotion, and that has really had an impact on my business. Let's get into tip number 10, and that's to expect the worst. Okay, that might sound really terribly pessimistic, but one of the best things that I did in my business was to expect the worst. Now, if you can imagine just how bad things could be, and you're okay with the outcome, then you know exactly what you're risking. Knowing the worst, but hoping for the best is the very thing that tempered my emotions when I first started my business. So the worst case scenario for me, as I began my photography business, was failing at photography, going back to law school, and then owning a really nice DSLR camera. Now, once I realized what life looked like if I failed, then I was ready to succeed. Like, I literally looked at the worst case scenario. I have no money. I have no clients. People laugh at me. I let my family down. Am I okay with that? Because if I'm okay with the worst case scenario, cool. Now I'm ready. Now I know exactly what's on the line. If I am okay with the worst, then I'm set up to achieve the best. Now, there are others who might be risking a mortgage, health insurance, a 401k. So I suspect that transition may be slower in order to safeguard your family and your assets, but it's really important to know what's on the line and then be okay with it. So, to wrap things up, the 10 tips that really had big impact for my service-based business when I started. Number 1, build your own table. Number 2, have hobbies outside of your craft. Number 3, network with other people who inspire you. Number 4, build a brand. Number 5, work with people who inspire you. For me, that was my husband. For you, you could just get emotional support from friends, families, or peers. Number 6, create a schedule. Number 7, hang out with people who are smarter than you. Number 8, create an experience. Number 9, ask your parents or people who are older that you trust for advice. And number 10, expect the worst. So friend, there you have it. These are the best things I did for my photography business, which eventually led me to being one of the top photographers in the world, one of the top 5 most socially influential photographers in the world, and one of the most influential photographers in the world. These are all awards that I had garnered between 2006 and 2012, and they had transformative effects on how I built my business and brand. before I let you go, and if you made it this far, clap it up for you. I have just talked your ear off. And if you're okay with it, we're basically BFFs. I'm going to braid you a friendship bracelet. I'm going to braid your hair, and I'm going to write in your yearbook KIT. Before I let you go, it's important to note that I built my business on hard work, not by luck. I did not get to where I am by never having a bad day. I got to where I am by having many bad days and choosing to get up every single time. Success is simply the ability to stand after each fall, learning from your mistakes and willing yourself to get better. Success comes to those who wait, to those who hustle, to those who remain undaunted. Successful entrepreneurs are deaf to the haters. They have failed more times than they can count, and yet they hold on to their hope for the future. You, sweet friend, you will succeed. Not because you're the smartest, the prettiest, the most talented, the most connected, or the funniest. Because I wasn't any of those things. You will succeed if you decide to get back up and try again. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Jasmine Star Show. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe from wherever you're listening to today. Drop a very kind podcast review if you're listening in iTunes, because all of these things will empower you not to miss an episode, and we can stay connected. Bye, friend.